Stillborn yet stillborn. It's a confusing, tricky phrase. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my experience with supporting women and families who have experienced the heartbreak of stillbirth. I will also have a look at the larger picture of why stillbirth is still so difficult to address and support in our North American culture. Hello, my name is Jo McRogers and I'm a stillbirth doula and a therapist. Please join our Grievolution community by subscribing to the channel and turning on the notifications. This way you'll know when I post my final video in this series dedicated to Pregnancy and Early Infant Loss Awareness Month, where I offer suggestions of how you might support someone whose baby has died. I first worked as a therapist and a doula in the happy world of happy births. But if you work in the birthing community long enough, you eventually come to intersect with loss. Since that time, I have trained and specialized in the world of loss with women and families. I believe that stillbirth, it remains one of the most difficult sources of grief to find your way with. When a baby dies, the unthinkable becomes the unspeakable. And when a stillbirth occurs, this is a heartbreaking loss that largely goes unsupported, unrecognized, and unspoken. It is as though the rest of the world can't begin to look at someone else's tragic loss. The silence around stillbirth allows us to fall victim to many of the myths and faulty understandings around how to support someone who has experienced a stillbirth. Often the parents themselves have no sense of where to begin, how to ask for help, how to accept this reality, and how to come to know that their grief is going to ask them to have fulfilling, loving lives that includes this devastating loss. Stillbirth is often defined as a loss subsequent to 20 weeks of pregnancy. Studies also reveal that the later weeks of pregnancy involve stronger and more tangible expectations of parenthood, of mothering. I think it is concerning that many choose to still follow the cultural standards to not reveal their pregnancy until after that magical 12-week marker. Many also believe that having a baby shower before the baby is born is bad luck. I worry that these practices, it's almost as though people are preparing to grieve alone and silently if necessary. If the pregnancy hasn't been announced, there are fewer people that you also then need to tell that you have lost the baby. If the baby shower hasn't occurred yet, then there are no gifts to be returned or stored, and there are no wishes for happiness that now need to turn into condolences. I worry that this is about how others may react to your loss. I worry that this sets women and families up to start their trajectory with grief from the place of silence, and silence often invites in guilt and shame. Stillbirth can occur in very different paths. Sometimes the stillbirth occurs during the birthing process. When this occurs, the need for emergency emotional first aid takes priority. The tricky part is that this can often overlook what might be helpful long-term, as the immediate needs are so urgent. Sometimes it is known that the baby has passed either in the womb or that the baby will not likely live for many breaths, days, or weeks outside of the womb. If this is the course of the stillbirth, there is work to be done to mitigate the trauma inherent in this loss. Discussions and planning about what is important in both the arrival and the farewell are key. Unless there is a medical reason for an urgent induction or delivery, please know that you can have time to process and plan. Grief often seeks solace in the past, but when the grief comes from pregnancy, loss, or early infant death, there isn't a lot of past to find comfort in. So for this reason, small sentimental tokens begin to take on a large emotional value. Pictures of tiny hands and fingers in your hand, locks of hair, footprints and handprints, sonograms, soft robes or blankets that first touch the baby's skin. These all become vessels of the love that was shared, the moments that were real, and they become placeholders for the love that will never end. Stillbirth is a very public loss because people knew you were pregnant. It adds another dimension into how the family is supposed to balance the private grieving versus the public condolences versus what their own unique grief tells them that they need. Navigating the social implications of stillbirth can become monumentally difficult for families. Women and men can struggle to define themselves as a mother or father when it is their first child who has died. Parents struggle as to how to announce how many children they have when they are asked. Some of the research that I have recently read speaks to the fact that months later after the stillbirth, 1/3 of the women who experienced the stillbirth were fully meeting the criteria for a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. A rate of PTSD this high is only found in soldiers returning from combat and torture. This just makes sense to me, given that PTSD is a sensory-fed experience. Birth, even when it involves loss, is full of sensory experiences: sounds, smells, touch, sights. When the birth is a stillbirth, it may also be full of the absence of some of those sensory experiences that we come to expect, such as hearing the baby take their first breath or hearing the baby's first cry. When it's anticipated, stillbirth can be a very quiet experience. Yet we are wired to know that birth is meant to be a loud, raging, joyful, loving experience. Because grief is such a unique and personal experience, so is the grief from a stillbirth unique and personal. If you have experienced a stillbirth or know and care for someone who has experienced a stillbirth, I'd be very thankful if you could leave a comment in our community comments below. Please let me know what you thought was either the most helpful to support you or others to process this loss, or what was the largest obstacle in seeking support for a stillbirth. The goal of this community is to do grief differently, and where stillbirth is concerned, this starts with giving a voice to it. Speaking begins to illuminate the community and support for this loss. Community reduces isolation, it buoys strength, it holds space for what doesn't need to be done alone. Working in this community of loss, I have had the very privileged position of seeing the heart and soul of many of these families in their darkest moments. And I can reassure you that a life filled with love after stillbirth is possible. While it will likely be the hardest life event that you ever face, I can attest to the possibility to life after stillbirth. It is not a case of in spite of or because of. What is needed is a heart space of as well as. On a personal, individual level, stillbirth requires support, acceptance, community, respect, space, time, connection, and a voice. Please seek peer-led support groups and forums, and please seek a trauma-informed counselor. On a systems level, support for stillbirth requires further funding for both research and support programs. It requires advocacy and more compassionate workplace bereavement policies. Stillbirth needs to be fully recognized as a major traumatic life event. If you have found this video informative or supportive, please like it with a thumbs up down below so that YouTube will know to share it broadly with anybody who is seeking information about stillbirth. If you or someone you love has experienced stillbirth, I offer kind thoughts, kind words, and a kind heart from my heart to yours. Take care, please, and I'll see you next time.